Welcome to the Purpose Focused Advisor, a podcast for financial planners, advisors, and RIAs looking to get the most out of yourself and your business. Join Rob Brown as he walks you through a journey that will allow you to take action in your business and your life so you can be the best that you can possibly be. Now here's your host, Rob.
Welcome back. Time for the Purpose Focused Advisor. Rob Brown here, along with my good friend and co-host, Phil Calandra. Good morning, Phil.
Hey, Rob. Good to be with you again.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm especially excited today because you're going to introduce us to one of your friends. But before you make that personal introduction, I want to introduce our guest, Lia Garvin, who is affectionately known, or maybe more than affectionately known, as the team whisperer. She provides business owners and team leaders with simple strategies and tools to communicate better with their team. She's an author. She's written The Unstoppable Team and Unstuck, and she's host of a podcast, Managing Made Simple. Lia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. So excited to be here.
Phil, tell us how you know Lia. That's how how she got here.
I'm happy to do that. Yeah, I pulled Lia on this program. Lia is a client of mine, but more importantly, we've had a chance over the last year or so to participate in a mastermind group together. And I really got to understand from an expert in operational function some of the things that we inherently do as financial advisors in our practices, and some of the things that it just dawned on me is like, well, yeah, I never really thought of it that way. So I think for every advisor that listens to our show, we're trying to give people actionable ideas and information that they can then springboard off. And after spending just many good operational structured sessions with Lia, I thought this is a natural to share with our community. You'll get into her background, Rob. There aren't many people that have as good a consulting pedigree as Lia does. But I'm excited to have this conversation with a good friend, and anxious to hear what she can help advisors out there do.
So, Lia, Phil and I are huge cheerleaders for financial advisors. We both really believe that the work advisors do for their clients is vitally important, and it has a compounding effect, because the more people that advisors are able to serve and care for, it just has a way of spreading. And but even though we're cheerleaders, one of the challenges we face is we realize that there are probably more than two, but at least two distinct groups of advisors: those that wing it and those that don't. Give us a little therapy. Is that true for entrepreneurs and business owners in general that you run into in the course of your consulting?
Oh, I love the question. And I would say absolutely, especially when it comes to leading your team. I think a lot of leaders think, well, I relate to people. I have friends. I've had, coaches before, or I've had a manager, and I've been in a company before. So naturally, I should just know how to manage. I should know how to motivate people to get things done. Or, when I say something, people should just follow along just because I said so. And I think that kind of leader that's more on the winging it side becomes really, really frustrated, because actually, you can only motivate people because they are drawn to you, have charisma or things like that for so long. The truth is, team members need to have clarity on how to get their work done. And that's really the work that I do with teams and leaders, is say, hey, let's translate that vision and the what and the why into how we're going to make it possible. Because when your team sees that you're just kind of winging it, they actually start to get nervous. Like, are we actually going to be able to accomplish these goals that we have? I'm sure with the advisors, right? They have financial targets they're trying to hit for their clients. They have, they have projections that they want to meet. And if your team is sitting there saying like, well, we don't have enough clients to do this, or we don't have the right tools for this, or it's really kind of, there's a lot of disconnect, they start to wonder, like, can I actually trust this leader? And so the winging it can actually result in, high turnover. It can result in folks feeling unmotivated. It can be internal chatter around like, does this person really know what they're doing? And so I love to take a leader that has, big ideas and big aspirations and say, okay, that's great. Now, how do we put the rubber to the road? Right? What systems do we need? What meetings do we have to have? Who's doing what? How does each individual know what their individual success looks like and how that's moving the needle for the business? And then you shift out of this winging it mode into a leader that, has this kind of playbook for getting things done.
Yeah, I love that.
So good.
And I want to extend that a little bit because I think sometimes that happens, at least in my experience, because to get to a new level of success, you can't keep doing things the way you've always done them. And sometimes that leader is someone who has built something from scratch. And now she wants to get to that new level of success and has not taken the time to either build the playbook, as you talk about, which is very important to what you do, or the internal skills to pull that off, because she might just be falling back on, like in the case of financial advisors. Well, I grew my practice finding clients and giving them financial advice.
Yeah.
So I just need to keep doing more of that to get to the next level.
Yeah.
And that's not the way that it works.
Yeah.
But the thing that comes to mind for me when we use the wing it words, I guess, is that one word or is that two words? Wing it.
It could be a hyphen.
Hyphen. Yeah. I think what comes to mind is that most financial advisors are skilled in particular way.
Yeah.
They have very big vision. They can be good planners. They can be good at execution of that financial plan. But most advisors are horrible at the details. They can cast the vision, but they don't know how then to craft the framework and then implement the scaling or whatever it is. So they end up endlessly winging it. I remember back years ago, 15 years ago, I absolutely was winging it. And then my secret weapon turned out to be my operations manager, which now happens to be my wife. But you build an operational structure very intentionally. And I think there are a lot of financial advisors that are hindering their success because they stay in that wing it mode and they don't have a framework to build out their own playbook or their own, actual structure.
Yeah.
And I know you see that in other industries and other fields. Why is it so difficult for business owners and entrepreneurs to recognize that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of what Rob was alluding to, this what got you here won't get you there, right? This mentality of, I think a lot of us start a business because we're great at this certain skill. And with financial advisors or lawyers or folks like consultants that they are the best at that one thing, they're going to be, they're great at it, but they're going to reach a ceiling and then they have to hire more people. And then part of that is actually translating that magic that made them the best to their teams. And first, I think can come some fear of like, well, if I download all of my, knowledge onto someone, like, are they going to like steal that and take over my clients and run a business and copy that? That's sometimes what I hear from people. Not as often though. What I hear a lot more is they actually just haven't thought about, they didn't realize because it was really intuitive to them. So like when you are great with talking to people, you're great at sales, or you can like look at a financial plan and just like see into the future. That's something that's really intuitive to you. So you don't actually know how to explain that to your team. And so it's actually more of a skill gap or really a opportunity to figure out like what is it that I'm doing here? And to slow down and think, when I'm reading a financial plan or when I'm setting this or when I'm looking at whatever this kind of forecasting tool laid out for me, and I like know what actually we want to do and we don't, and this discernment you have, thinking about what questions am I running through and actually slowing down as a leader and kind of writing that out or thinking about or explaining like, okay, I think through these questions. These are the things that any tool is going to miss. These are things other financial planners typically don't see. Like, you actually start to take inventory of your secret sauce. And that, when you do that, you can actually translate it to your team and train folks to be your number two, or to be kind of pass the torch to them. So I think sometimes what people actually say is a fear of, well, I don't want to, I don't want to train folks that are going to take over my business. It's actually that they don't really even know what they're doing. That is that magic. And so that's what I help business owners do often, is like, hey, let's walk me through your thought process. How do you come to a, decision here? How do you serve your best client? And what are some of those things that you do? We look at, okay, well, what are some of the things that you could train your own team members on? And then how do we explain that to them? And so that a business owner doesn't get stuck in this place of, why don't people just get it? I think we all get really frustrated when we hire what we thought was great people. They start their job and it's like, that was the decision you made? Like, what was that about? And we get, and so I think we prevent the winging it or having that ceiling when we hire folks, but then take inventory and actually do that training on the job. Maybe you have folks shadow you. Maybe you talk them through the thought process so that you're actually able to scale like what's in your brain to across your team.
Yeah, I like that, because you use the term secret sauce. And I think that a lot of business owners, owners of financial advisory practices to be included, don't really know what their secret sauce is, because they're just so busy doing, they can't break it out. And then when they start to build that team, they think they can then assign certain tasks or responsibilities to team members, because that is what somebody else should be doing. But they could be assigning the thing that they themselves do the best, that is that secret sauce. And all of a sudden you are doing things as the leader that aren't as important as the things that you're assigning to somebody else in terms of the overall growth of the business. So understanding that secret sauce is really, really important.
Yeah. Go ahead, Phil. Yeah.
I was going to ask how, we see it a lot today when you talk about buy-in, or you're getting the team, the leader taking control and casting the vision and getting people, on the same page, running out of the playbook. I guess you see this, but it seems that today it's getting increasingly more difficult to get people to buy in, let alone small organizations, even big organizations. We used to have, in our country, in corporate circles, it was pretty common to have one or two jobs your entire career.
Yeah.
And if you're a small business owner and you're hiring for, operations manager or client service representative, some of them have 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 jobs on their resume, and clearly that they just seem to not be loyal or committed to anything. Do you see that a lot when you're trying to coach and up-level teams? Hiring is hard, and then we have this culture almost where, you know what I'm saying? It's like there's always a revolving door. So as the leader of my firm, it's like, I think I got a good team, but I can't get them to buy in. And then I scratch my head and say, well, do they really care? They're not the business owner like me and my family's dependency on my business. How do you get around that?
So that's a great point. I think right now, like, and especially post-COVID, there is a lot less loyalty to staying somewhere long-term. I think just between folks reinventing their relationship with time and with, what's important to them, and kind of there's been a lot of shakeups in the workplace. And, you mentioned my background at the start of the show, I came from big tech. I worked at Apple, Microsoft, Google. In that industry, it's actually pretty common to change jobs like every 2 years. There's a lot of turnover, like not turnover, but mobility internally, and a lot of, going to a competitor and back and forth to negotiate a better deal for yourself, frankly. And so in certain environments, I think that's to be expected, but that doesn't make it any easier for an employer by any means. And so I think when you are a business owner, as you said, Phil, and you are wanting folks to be there for the long haul with you, because when you're going to train and invest in folks and and, spend the time and give them your all. You want them to give them their all, right?
Yeah.
And so the biggest thing I think we can do to foster loyalty and retention, and also this sense of buy-in that you asked about, is, shifting into this ownership mindset. And the way that we do this on teams, this is my palatable word for accountability. It means to create a sense of personal accountability. But if you say the word accountability in your team, people think you mean they're going to be punished and blamed for something. So we can't use that word. But how do we create a sense of ownership? Well, we ask people how they would solve a problem. We bring them into the fold. We teach them the secret sauce, like I'm saying, and we show them how they fit into the bigger picture. So if you take each of your team members and you say, hey, here's where we're trying to go as a firm. Here's our goals. This is, maybe you don't maybe share revenue targets, but maybe share profitability, or you share the number of clients you want to impact, something that you feel comfortable sharing with your team. And you say, here's how every role fits into that. And here's why you matter. And here's why without you, we wouldn't be able to get there. And then you don't just say why that person matters, but every week or every month, you have them reporting on what they are doing to get there. And so a big shift I've seen with getting this buy-in is, instead of having a team meeting and you say hey, Rob, you were supposed to hit this profitability, and you didn't make that. Next time you got to do it. That actually doesn't mean anything. Instead, I go Rob, where are you at this week? You tell me the numbers and your plan of how you're going to get there, or how you're going to keep it there if you hit it. And I've been really advising business owners on shifting the ownership of the personal accountability onto their team members. A lot of times we are telling our team members where we're at. We're telling them what they have to be doing. We're telling them maybe what their plan is for course correcting. Instead, I suggest you say to your team members, every week, you're going to come to our meeting, you're going to share where you're at, and you're going to share how you're going to stay there, how you're going to get back on track. Because the follow through also creates that buy-in, because we see, hey, if I do this or don't, they're going to ask me about it. And you also create that sense of a little bit of group peer pressure, which is actually very helpful on a team. We're we're going around and Phil's going to say his plan, Rob's going to say him, and Sarah is going to say hers, and Joe, and you have everybody you start to see, well, Phil and Rob are stepping up. I can't come in here and be I don't have a plan. You know what I mean? It becomes very obvious, and the team actually sort of self-corrects a little bit too.
Yeah, I like that.
So I love that. One of the things that I do with some of the teams that I coach is I really encourage them to have daily stand-up meetings, which are just short meetings where each person gets to say, this is something that I did yesterday that everybody needs to be aware of. Not all the little details. This is what I'm working on right now. And then this is where I need some help, or this is where I could help somebody else on the team, because you've had that daily interaction. That accountability, that repetition creates lots of healthy conversation. And my biggest challenge with that, usually with clients, is getting them started. So what's the trick, or maybe not a trick? What's the process, Lia, that you use to help somebody really get started with an activity, implementing a meaningful meeting where actually people come in prepared to play their part, and not just putting their heads down and hoping that nobody calls on them?
Yeah, I love that. So I think setting, you with the stand-up, you had a very clear agenda. I think that's the first thing and foremost. And one of the biggest ways I help teams save time, and I typically say I can save teams 30 hours a month on average. And the first is by having clear meeting agendas, by having, here is in a stand-up. A lot of people don't want to do stand-ups because someone gives a 10-second update and someone gives a 15-minute update. And you're and it can be hours depending on the size of your team. So you scope it down. You say, hey, in our stand-up, everybody's going to get 30 seconds or 1 minute. And you say, what's top of mind? Where do I need support? Right? Or something like that. And you scope it very tight so that you can just go boom, boom, boom. You get through the people, and you don't have this thing where no one knows if it's supposed to, how much in depth you're supposed to talk or whatever. So you have a really clear plan that everybody's following consistently. And then if you do have folks that drone on for 10, 15 minutes, if I find it helpful to actually set a timer if you're kind of going rapid fire, Or you chat with that person after and say, hey, again, the format is to just have this quick update. So for tomorrow, please, share a 1-minute update, and we can connect one-on-one if you have more stuff you want to talk about, or if a further meeting's needed. So you sort of actively manage that meeting. And then I think with the stand-up format, it is one that can have that group peer pressure to kind of be ready with something. If you're finding some people show up with something and some don't, then having a meeting around working norms in your team and saying, okay, here are the key meetings we're going to have throughout the week. We have the daily stand-up. Maybe we have a metrics review at the end of the week. Maybe you have a manager's meeting, something like that. Let's say you have that rhythm for your week. You say, here's the kind of ground rules that we have for each of these meetings. You come, you're prepared. You share this thing, like we said in the previous, you bring your metrics ready to talk about your game plan, and you tee up before these meetings, what are the expectations? Because I think when it all comes down to it, any conflict, anything that isn't going as planned, any someone that's kind of not following, it's typically just misaligned expectations. And we might think this person isn't following the guidelines. They don't want to be here. They're doing this. And they actually may not realize it. So we always want to start by setting expectations, or reiterating them if you have set them, and just saying, hey, want to make sure we're all on the same page. This is why we have the stand-up. And then that's the other one. If people still aren't bought in, and actually typically to get them bought in the first place, is to give a little context for the why. Hey, here's why we're having a stand-up, and here's how it benefits you. When you hear what other folks are doing, if you're feeling stuck, oh, hey, Phil said he had a big breakthrough in this area. I know I can go to Phil directly, right? And so we share people why we're doing these things, along with a clear agenda and clear expectations. And it's a lot less likely they're like, oh, another meeting, because they see there's a direct benefit to themselves.
But don't some of the leaders themselves think, gosh, Lia, you're telling me that I'm going to save time by having more meetings? And now it sounds like I'm going to actually have to lead those meetings. I myself can't just show up. Is that part of building the playbook, is teaching the leader how to be a leader? And in particular, in what we've been talking about, being a leader in those meetings, so that the leader plays the role just like everybody else that's in that meeting plays a role?
Yeah. And I think with that question, it's talking to that leader about, well, what level of depth do you want to have with your team? Like, are you involved in the day-to-day? Do you have a manager or maybe a COO that is overseeing this, and you don't have to be in the stand-up? So I think before we figure out what meetings, I tease apart, like, what is the information that has to be shared throughout the team, and what's the best vehicle for that? So stand-ups work really well if everybody does need to hear about what's going on. So you're using them in this industry. They're very common in engineering teams. Like, hey, everyone, this is what we're doing, rapid fire. In other industries, it may be more that, a document circulated with everyone's kind of top priority or something else, or, you have a kickoff in the week, but it's more of, highlights, lowlights, where we set. So there's different vehicles, I think, that we can use depending on what is the real problem we're solving. And so I think when a leader says, oh, I don't even want one more meeting, it's like, I'll ask them, well, what level of information do you need? And then what information does your team members need to hear from each other in order to move forward? Typically, when you see too many meetings, it's a product of like a lack of cascading of information. So people they're not sharing the updates. They're not passing down decisions. So then no one knows what's going on. So they have a new meeting to talk about it. But if you said, hey, we have a leadership team every Monday, and coming out of that, we send an email at 9:30 a.m. It has the plan for the week. Everybody has to read that to get the plan. You don't need a meeting to communicate the plan if you've gotten folks in the rhythm of reading that email, so to speak.
Right. Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I was kind of pigeonholing the conversation a little bit towards just meetings, but there are other techniques here too that are equally vital, including making sure you have the right people in the right seats. And you've used the term a couple of times, chief operating officer. And in my experience, as advisory practices are growing, that is the position that is I'm not sure if it's reluctance or hardest to fill, because it's hard to see somebody taking leadership from the leader who's used to, being the CEO and the COO maybe, or the leader and the assistant leader at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of leaders come to me, business owners specifically, and say, I don't like the managing stuff. I don't want to deal with the personnel stuff. I want to set the vision. I want to be out there building the business. I don't like the people management. And then they don't hire someone that's going to do the people management part, right? So I think you have to sort of think about, if you're not going to fill that, what do folks need to stay motivated, to have the clear expectations? The work I do in the more fractional COO capacity, or establishing a playbook, is I think it's when a team doesn't have that COO, what is the foundation we can establish so that everybody understands what's expected of them and how to be successful before we get to a place where we really do need to hire this person. I think a lot of firms will hire an ops manager or someone like that that's essentially doing a lot of administrative and tactical work. That's not the best use of an ops manager, right? Like Phil spoke about Trish, who is a operational executive. This person has people that are doing the tactical meeting setup, right? Like this is not, an ops manager is not an executive assistant. Those are different roles, right? And a true ops visionary can see, how are we best utilizing people? How are we looking ahead at scaling really from that teams, and what systems do we need? And then, and then they set up the system so that people can be following it. And that's a real expertise that you're going to need to bring in, whether it's a team member or from a fractional or consulting capacity. It doesn't really matter, but it is like that switch that has to be fired in order to scale, because like we said at the start of this, there's a what and a why, and then there's a how. And a how is just a different skill set. When I talk about that, I like these kinds of things, like setting up playbook processes. A lot of business owners are like, "Oh my god, it's horrible!" Like, ugh, like who likes that? It's because it is a different way of thinking. It is a different skill set, And when I am on a team and I hear a leader that has an amazing vision, the first thing I think about was like, okay, how are we going to do that? Who do we need? What's the timeline? Do we have the budget? Like my mind starts going that way. The visionary is irritated by those questions sometimes you're asking.
We are.
So you need that dichotomy. Yeah.
Yeah. The visionary wants to print the picture and then put all the cuts in it to make a puzzle, and then throw it up in the air. And that ops person says, I get what the picture looks like. Now I'm going to help put it together to make it look even better than it was when we got started. Maybe an imperfect analogy, but that was
no, totally.
That's a good analogy. So one of the things that came to my mind as we work as advisors or as business owners, as we're working on our business and in our business and all those things, technology has become more and more prevalent. And I feel oftentimes left behind. How do you see technology from a fractional COO, from a consulting, the perch that you have, and it could be for any business, how do you leverage technology the right way? And how do you suggest people tackle that? Because for a lot of us that have been around a little while, outside of email, we didn't really have a tech stack. And now all I see is all these different tools. And I'm like, wow, again, I have the vision. I know where I want to go. How do you take the operational tech stack and now layer that in?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I agree. I mean, I think it could be so overwhelming. And then now with introduce, AI and where we're supposed to fold that into the mix and all of these things, I think first principles though around technology, I think, are to utilize it to enhance and to use whatever tools you introduce, use them in the simplest ways to get the basics and then build from there. So tools folks typically use for project management, maybe it's Asana or Monday or ClickUp or some of these, in a big company, maybe Jira, some of these task management tools. Start with knowing, tracking your team's capacity. How many people do you have on different things? How much of their bandwidth is taken up? And then the overall status of work. When you've done those two things, you pretty much have a bird's eye view as a business owner. You can say, if I woke up at 3 a.m. and need to know where a project's at and who can I put on this new client, you would have that. Like, that's what we want to answer first. So many tools out there add so many features. And again, coming from technology, I know like it's a lot of stuff packed into these things. We want it to plan our tasks and our meetings and then like spit out meeting notes and plan actions. There's so many things and such a high learning curve that we don't even use a tool then. We say, I'm going to just send a spreadsheet around.
Right.
So I would say whatever tool, it's kind of figure out what's the minimum viable product kind of version of like, what are the first things that we need to do? What are the big problems we're solving? And then build from there. And then even with something like AI, it's like, hey, how can we fold this in to save some time? So typically I think AI, one of the easiest ways to utilize it is for research, right? So, hey, when are we needing to do research, or when are we needing to kind of cull down some information? Like, let's use it for that and get comfortable with figuring out how to use these tools, ask prompts, synthesizing information, and then building from there. But I think where people really can get overwhelmed, all of us, myself included, is like, learn this new tool today, learn every single feature it possibly could have, use it. And then it's not updated. It's out of sync. Different people understand it differently. And it can actually slow you way down and create an aversion to technology, as you kind of alluded to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when it comes to technology, less is more. And learning how to use the things that are actually going to make a difference in your business comes first. And you just need to be careful with it, because it's so easy. I love the fact that Phil mentioned a tech stack, because my tech stack when I first got going was a monitor, not even a PC, that I shared with somebody else, and a telephone. That was my tech stack.
There it is. Yeah.
But the world has changed, and we're constantly being pinged with not only new technology, but with also enhancements to existing technology, because there's competition for that existing technology that we have on our desks. And I think we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing over and over again that technology or AI might be able to help us with? And I think that's the best way to answer that question.
And obviously, like having a dashboard where you have all of your information, consolidating, your different, one of the things, Phil, and I started with is like consolidating my different 401ks. Like, I didn't even know what my total, portfolio looked like. That's a perfect use for technology, right? Getting it all in one place. Or looking at your different scenarios with level of investment and can you achieve your goals? So these are the things that really, I think, off the bat, that every financial planner will be utilizing already. But then, hey, are there different ways that you can synthesize information using AI, right? Maybe that folds into it a little bit. But like you say, I agree fully, less is more. And especially if your clients are getting overwhelmed with technology, don't like throw them into it head first. Like them having to switch things and logins and passwords. Like, I know from just, different generations or have different levels of comfort, and it could be a deterrent if it's too far without that support. So if you're going to be onboarding your clients on new technology, I would say, having a team member really sitting down with them, getting them comfortable in it, not just doing that once, having like, hey, we're going to log into that new portal. Here's how you see, here's the benefit of this. This is addressing something that you asked for. You wanted a consolidated view, instead of, because I have seen folks become rejecting like too much of technology of things, especially in, industries that had not prior been using it to that extent. And so I think it's, how do we give people a little bit more support too?
Yeah. When you mentioned that dashboard that that financial advisors clients have, what that made me think about was, you also mentioned tools like Asana and Monday, which allow you to create that dashboard for your business. So maybe a good takeaway here, I'm sure you'd agree with this, Lia, is for someone who's building that leadership structure building that team who wants to not wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and worry, but if they do, they have a place to go. Think about building a dashboard for you and for your business the same way that you build a dashboard for a client, so the client doesn't wake up in the middle of the night one day when the market has a bad week and say, oh gosh, where am I? They can look and they can see, hey, my plan's still going to work. It can work both ways.
Yeah. And one thing I want to say, when that kind of brings me back to a point I was thinking earlier is like, what is some of that secret sauce as a leader? I think, one of Phil, I'll say your secret sauce is the education side of it, and really sharing kind of like the philosophy that you work with your clients. And that's part of it. I think that we want to be thinking about as a leader, right? Like, hey, this is how we differentiate ourselves as a business, right? We make sure folks that our clients aren't waking up at 3 a.m. just thinking that they're going to call us and make some big moves with their money, because they actually know that our plan is on a different time horizon, right? These things that I'm sure you talk to all your clients about. But that's the kind of stuff that we need to be communicating to our team members, because we can't have our team members out of sync. And this is where kind of, the internal way that we communicate also translates down to our clients is, hey, if we are about the long-term plan and really upholding that vision, when our clients come to us with these concerns, here's how we address those. So you want to get ahead of some of the kind of communication things that can create your team members making missteps. Like, well, the client called me and they said, like, I'm not getting off the phone until you sell this thing off. And they actually, a newer, more junior employee may not know how to handle that. So you've all seen, right, as business owners, you've all seen the extreme things that people will come to you with. Talk about that with your teams, normalize it, and say, hey, here's how we create a supportive, but yet confident and like kind of grounded in our principles. And here's what we do and how we handle those situations. And when you pull me in, if you feel you're out of your depth, right? So there are moments to dip in. And I think that's part of that expectation setting too.
Oh, absolutely.
So you've worked with big tech. You mentioned that, the likes of Microsoft and Google, Apple. What are the big differences from large corporations that tackle operational leadership and small businesses? Because I would guess, and Rob, maybe we don't have statistics on this, but the people that are listening to our podcast right now are successful advisors. They're trying to scale, they're trying to improve their business, but they could be small teams. They could be small to mid-size. Maybe we have some large corporate advisors. But Lia, what do you see as the main difference between working with big companies and small companies? And what are the quick hits? What Rob and I call them sprints. What are the kind of the short, quick things that our listeners could be doing right now to improve their operation structure?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest difference is in a big corporation, it moves a lot slower because you have so many levels of approval and so many interdependencies. And so as a smaller business, you have a lot of opportunity, right? In a big company, you also have pre-existing structures and some operational things you're already plugging into. So you don't have the opportunity to just change everything probably overnight. Now, as a small business, because it's, sort of up to you, I would say that the biggest sort of quick win would be to figure out like how can you make decisions faster? Which decisions do you specifically need to be making versus what can you hand off to different team members? If you have to make all the decisions at this moment because you don't have, folks that you feel like can make the decision that way, what information do you need to have communicated to you so that you can make that decision fast? And how do you make sure you're not a bottleneck where everything's coming to you? Like, what is your process for getting through your email inbox or going to the right meetings, right? Because I think a big challenge we can have as a business owner when we're building a team and we don't maybe have, leaders yet developed on the team is we are operating as the visionary and then the day-to-day line manager, basically. And so we're doing a little bit of everything. So I'd say figuring out like, how do you make decisions and how do you make that faster? I mentioned the other time saver is figuring out what are the key meetings you need, who needs to be at those, and what are the agendas for those so that you're not having meetings that went from 30 minutes to 45 to an hour. If you think about if it was supposed to be 30 and it goes an hour, 30 minutes times your time times your 5 team members, right? That's, 6 people of whatever hourly rate or what they could have been bringing in the business, right? So that starts ballooning when we have a lot of meetings that are going over time.
Yeah.
Having it really clear across your team of what are the things that have to get done like in a day or in a week, so that folks, when they finish a task, they're not waiting around for marching orders. Folks should really have a clear plan of, what is the workflow and what do they do when they finish something. They should have a backlog of like, maybe they have the stuff they get through for a day, but then there's client maintenance thing. Hey, every week I check in with someone. I just send an email saying, thinking of you, hope you're doing it right. Whatever you have, like a kind of a relationship management sort of responsibilities, figure out. And this is really, I mentioned the playbook, what I build out for teams. What is their unique playbook for their company on, these expectations for team members, how we're going to hit these priorities, what way we're tracking work, what meetings do we have, how do we make decisions, what does success and performance look like? That is this kind of unstoppable team framework. Because when you've mapped all that out and you have it in an artifact, like you say, check the playbook, right? Like people know they're not coming to you and asking you, what do we talk about this meeting every week? You've already talked about it. So I would say the biggest tip here is to, the more you communicate up front, the more, folks actually understand their marching orders, and you, and you're not micromanaging. You don't feel like, oh, I'm always repeating myself, because you've established that, and that they can point them back to that instead of it feeling like it's a moving target.
I love it. And I think this is a great place to land the plane, because this kind of takes us back to that first question. The way to keep somebody from winging it after they've figured it out is to have a playbook, because the playbook keeps you from winging it again at a new level.
Right. Exactly. And that's something, asking about big companies, they're big and they have a lot of money, but they don't have everything figured out. And I think what I learned, like Phil, your question, working in big companies, is things like accountability are often the biggest challenges. And a small business can get ahead of that. You don't need to have to deal with that. There aren't these different political players and different things and back channeling and different things that happens in big companies. So I think folks recognizing you have a real opportunity to like shift into that ownership mindset, help people like get there and get that buy-in, because that is when I work with big companies, do workshops, a lot of it is around that, because it's a very different can of worms.
Yeah. I just envision in the big company, which I have experience in, there's cases and cases of bottlenecks.
Yeah.
In the small business or in the real functioning dynamic financial advisory practice, you can remove all the bottlenecks and run lean and efficient and profitable and have a much more elegant business. I think that it could be the bottleneck removal playbook.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Lia, it has been great having you on the show. But before we close out, I'd love to just give you the opportunity to tell the audience the best way to connect with you or learn more about what you do, and maybe a little bit more about how to get a copy of The Unstoppable Team.
Yes. So you can find me on my website at liagarvin.com. That's LIAGARVIN. Or on LinkedIn. I love when folks reach out after you listen to the episode. Let me know what you thought. So liagarvin.com, Lia Garvin on LinkedIn. Check out the podcast, Managing Made Simple, where I share a lot of the strategies like we talked about today. And then you can head to liagarvin.com/Unstoppable Team book. And we'll put that in the show notes to get a free copy of The Unstoppable Team, just pay shipping. So that is my gift to listeners there, to grab a copy of the book, and you'll really see how you can put this into practice, like creating your own team operations playbook.
Well, great. That's a lot, and that's a lot of great ways for folks listening to this podcast to take action on what we talked about. Phil, you were spot on. Lia was a rock star guest. Absolutely. I learned so much during this conversation. So to our audience, thanks for listening. And remember, we're rooting for your success. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Purpose Focused Advisor. If you want to learn more, head over to our website, truestfancoaching.com. There you'll learn all about becoming a purpose-focused advisor. You'll also find today's show notes and links to the other gifts and resources we talked about during the episode. Again, thanks for listening, and remember, we're rooting for your success.